Not all souls enter the world with the same weight. Most are born close to the center, carrying ordinary wounds, gifts, and lessons. But others arrive with a charge. Their lives do not remain merely personal. Their presence affects the field around them. The ancient world called them gods, heroes, monsters, tempters, kings, queens, and world shapers. But perhaps they were not gods in the final sense. Perhaps they were carriers. This is part 6 of Secret Societies, Karma, and the Final Choice. The old gods move through human vessels.
Interlude 3, The Souls Who Carry the Gods. Not all souls enter the world with the same weight. Most are born close to the center. They carry tendencies, wounds, gifts, and unfinished lessons, but their inner balance remains within the ordinary range of human experience. They may lean toward kindness or selfishness, reason or imagination, courage or fear, but the leaning is slight enough that life itself can shape them. There are other souls who are not so centered. They arrive with a charge. In the oldest ages, before the fifth sun had settled into the shape mankind now knows, the universe created a set of counterweights. These souls were not balanced in the ordinary way. They were marked by a cosmic plus or minus, a tilt so strong that their lives could not remain merely personal. Their presence affected the field around them. The first and most dangerous of these was Tiamat. She carried the -2. This was not simple wickedness. It was deeper and stranger than that. Her soul had been formed through distortion, and the distortion bent her inner currents backward. What should have become generosity turned inward. What should have become tenderness could emerge as harm. Her imagination was vast, but her reason was veiled. She could feel deeply, but the feeling did not pass cleanly into action. She was not evil at her root. She was inverted. To balance her, the universe brought forth Maui. He carried the +2. Where Tiamat was inwardly reversed, Maui was outwardly heroic. His compassion moved cleanly. His courage rose naturally. He was reason-based, steady, direct, and deeply aligned with the living earth. Later memories would preserve him as a culture hero, a shaper of islands, a being whose actions seemed too large for ordinary humanity. This was not because he was a god. It was because his soul carried more force than an ordinary vessel was meant to display. After them came the lesser but still potent pairings. Lamu, whose later path would pass through Adam, Aristotle, and Cicero, carried a +1. His soul leaned toward order, reason, leadership, and restraint. He was not perfect, but his inner current was stabilizing. When he entered a life, he often became a center around which others could organize themselves. Lahamu also carried a +1, but of a different kind. Hers was the surplus of compassion, imagination, softness, beauty, and love. Where Lamu clarified, Lahamu warmed. Where he structured, she harmonized. Her presence could awaken devotion because she carried the memory of love in an unusually concentrated form. Against Lahamu stood Chingu. He carried a -1. Chingu was reason without mercy, clarity without compassion. His distortion was colder than Tiamat's. Where her inversion confused love into harm, Chingu's condition sharpened thought into cruelty. He could understand structure, motive, weakness, and strategy, but the suffering of others did not naturally restrain him. This made him dangerous. It also made him useful to the darker roles of the story. There was another -1 soul as well, the feminine opposite of Lamu, bound to the Mars current. Her ascent is less visible in the memory of mankind. Her names are scattered, her record less clearly preserved. Yet her function mattered. Where Lamu's disciplined reason stabilized the masculine Mars current, she carried its inward-bending opposite, imagination marked by self-orbit, desire, and the pull of attention toward the self. Together, these 6 formed a strange balance. Tiamat and Maui. Lamu and his hidden opposite. Lahamu and Chingu. 3 pairings. 6 charged souls. Each one tilted beyond the common measure. They were not gods. But mankind would remember them that way. This is one of the great confusions of history. When an ordinary soul enters a body, the life may be meaningful, even beautiful, but it rarely bends myth around itself. When one of the six enters, the story changes scale. Events gather intensity. People near them feel pulled into larger patterns. Symbols awaken. Old forces become active. The ancient world did not know how to describe this except through divinity. So it called them gods, demigods, monsters, heroes, tempters, mothers, kings, queens, and world shapers. But the name God was never quite right. They were better understood as carriers. Each carried a peculiar access to the rogue powers released in the old imbalance. These powers were not the pure forces of the source. They were fractured currents, godlike, potent, unstable, and unfinished. They could inspire art, kingship, prophecy, conquest, seduction, or madness, depending on the soul through which they moved. Most human beings could not sustain such currents for long. The six could. Their souls were shaped around extremity. This made them dangerous, but it also made them necessary. When they incarnated, certain powers that normally remained dormant could enter history again. Their lives became openings. Around them, old mythic forces found handles in the material world. This is why the secret societies cared about symbols more than they understood. A symbol alone has power, but only a limited kind. It can gather attention. It can focus belief. It can preserve a pattern. But when a charged soul stands inside that symbol, the pattern becomes alive. The old gods begin to move. Not as beings descending from clouds, but as forces passing through human vessels. A ruler may become more than a ruler. A lover more than a lover. A deceiver more than a deceiver. A reformer more than a reformer. The person remains human, yet the current behind the person grows mythic. This is how little g gods survived into the modern world. Not through temples alone. Not through statues alone. They survived through incarnation, resonance, ritual, and memory. They survived wherever a charged soul entered a prepared pattern. And the patterns were being prepared again. The brotherhoods had preserved the outer architecture, degrees, symbols, oaths, pillars, stars, veils, and sacred geometry. The ambitious souls had brought hunger. The special actors had entered the darker roles. Higher souls had begun to anchor the counterweight. But the six brought something else. They brought voltage. When Tiamat incarnated, the unresolved mother current stirred. Around her, inversion became visible. Love and control, tenderness and harm, longing and resentment became tangled until everyone near her was forced to confront the hidden confusion within themselves. When Lamu incarnated, order gathered. He did not always know why others looked to him, but they did. His reason carried memory from before memory. He could become lawgiver, organizer, defender, or reluctant center of a world trying to hold itself together. When Lahamu incarnated, beauty softened the field. She reminded the world that compassion was not weakness. Her presence could make the hardened soul ache for innocence again. When Chindu incarnated, the cold adversary returned. The temptation of reason without love became active. Systems sharpened. Hierarchies hardened. The dream of control found a voice. When Maui incarnated, the heroic counterforce entered the earth current. He carried the power to act cleanly, to do what needed doing without becoming entangled in the drama of self. And when the hidden Mars feminine moved through history, desire, attention, and self-fascination took on their own strange gravity. Her role was quieter in record, but not necessarily smaller in effect. These souls did not need to remember who they were. In most lives, they did not. The soul does not require memory to transmit its charge. A flame does not need to know the name of fire in order to burn. This is important for what comes next. When we speak of Lamu and Tiamat as Adam and Eve, we are not saying that the ancient pair consciously remembered their cosmic origins. They did not walk the earth reciting the history of old suns. They lived inside the veil, as all incarnate beings must. But beneath the veil, the pattern remained. Adam carried the Lama current, reason, order, structure, and the ache to guide. Eve carried Tiamat's wounded current, imagination, inversion, longing, and the terrible confusion of love turned backward. Their story became the seed story of mankind because their souls carried more than personal marriage. They carried the old fracture into human form. The same would happen again and again. Across empires, religions, revolutions, secret orders, and quiet households, these charged souls would return. Sometimes they would stand at the center of history. Sometimes they would pass almost unseen. But whenever they entered the field, the old powers became easier to reach. This was both peril and mercy. Peril, because rogue godlike forces can ruin those who invoke them without wisdom. Mercy, because what never enters the world cannot be healed by the world. The six were not sent to be worshipped. They were sent to make visible what mankind still needed to understand. The gods they carried were never final gods. They were fragments, distortions, masks, and magnified forces waiting to be reconciled. And as the secret societies deepened their work, as symbols were drawn and rituals repeated, those forces began to find their way back into human affairs. The old gods were not returning because mankind had remembered them. They were returning because the souls who carried them were constantly incarnating. For the most part.
In the next chapter, the fire of liberty enters the story. The American Revolution becomes more than politics. It becomes a spiritual opening, where the currents of reason, leadership, freedom, and hidden power gather around the birth of a new nation.